Well, uh, lots happened since the last time we did a podcast.
It's been a while.
Yeah. When was the last time we did this? June?
Yeah,
July?
yeah, June, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
Did you come in? You came in during wheat harvest, didn't you? No,
Nope.
it was after that.
It was after we harvest.
Well, it had to be July.
I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. I'm trying to think the last time I actually drove through here and had time to be here. I was here last month, but we did not record a podcast last month.
No.
Oh man, probably was July. Well, Trump won. So that's news.
Yeah.
The ag economy is still not very good.
No, I think it continues. Extreme shakiness. I saw, um, a couple of the big, um, humongous corporations, announcing more layoffs this week. So
hmm
that just continue. Like almost every week now, you're hearing, one of the large ag corporations are laying employees off.
Oh yeah, it's happening. I heard it's officially hit all three of the big manufacturers for equipment. I know it's come to some of the smaller manufacturers for equipment. I know it's coming for. I think the input companies are. They sound like they're still doing okay, but they have a lot of control over their prices. So you farmers can't really live without seed or chemical, can you?
No, I see it. It does seem like those companies have remained pretty stable, But I wonder about Bayer, and I know they're wanting to offload, and financially they're a very
Yeah,
sound
it's
company,
Bayer.
but
Bayer's stock is in the dumps
yeah,
compared. I was just talking to someone yesterday about that.
yeah,
Like their stock price comparatively to 2 years ago is down.
sure. I
So,
mean, it's got to be the ag, part of their company dragging them down
oh,
because
100%.
I don't,
I don't think they have any desire to have ag as a part of their
oh,
company anymore.
I mean, they lost that.
It's just too big. It's just so big to sell. It's just like who do you
Yeah,
sell it to? The Chinese?
yeah. I
Like
mean, there's only about two companies that could even swing the purchase or whatever.
barely. I bet barely even.
Yeah,
The amount of companies that would have any sort of cash supply or be able to secure that amount of debt is just like, yeah. I
and
mean,
lawsuits potentially too.
oh yeah. Even Deere wouldn't touch that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But man, it's been wild. I was just driving. I just drove down here from Nashville. I was at Mutiny Crop Performance's dealer meeting, and Mutiny does ag retail very different. The way they approach it's very different. The way they've gone about working with farmers is very different, and it's just a very stark contrast to a lot of the meetings and conversations I've been in the past few months. And I was just like driving over here, getting fired up. I was like, oh man, Trump won. If RFK gets in, there's going to be a lot of things there. They're talking about getting Joel Salatin in some advisory role. The new ag commissioner is another mover and shaker. So just in general, the ag space in 2025 is I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to change. I don't think I was thinking about on the way here. Roundup's always going to be a thing. Roundup's not going on anywhere, despite what RFK might say. I don't think the lobbyists will probably let too much happen. We all know that the billion-dollar lobbyists have plenty of money to throw around with politicians, and so that just makes things go slowly. But I don't think ag is going to. Um, I'm not saying the cycle is going to break. Uh, in terms of like the up down of the ag economy. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. I think that's always going to happen just as long as the commodities exist. But I think the circles within ag and specifically some of these larger companies, I think there's going to be some power shifting happening in the next few years. And I was just driving over here, especially after hanging out with a company like Mutiny, where their mission statement is for farmers who are demanding to make a change. Like the whole reason that company was started was because traditional ag retail was causing problems for them and for their customers. And they said, this is not how this is supposed to be. And just sitting there with them, I'm like, man, they're 100% right. Like things, a lot of people are getting fed up with a lot of this. I mean, you've had your frustrations with some of these large companies. I've had my frustrations on these large companies. I've been sitting in meetings with a bunch of people who work for these large companies who they work in government advisory roles, or they work for very large commodity organizations, or they work for some of the big ag retailers. And you start listening to them. It's like, man, like the bureaucracy and corporate just cesspool that ag has become. I was just sitting there driving here and I was like, the farmers don't have any control of what's going on right now. And that's so stupid and it's so wrong. And just, I just see something happening, especially with a lot of these younger guys I talk to who are just, they're kind of done with it. They do not want it to continue to be farmer take what you're given and things happening.
I think in the ag space, it is such a small, um, like it's such a small microcosm of the economy, like in the fact that there's not many people that control it, companies or people, and uh, and so it's very easy for a super large company to get a extreme grip on a humongous revenue generating market. Just not a lot of people controlling the revenue within the market,
Hmm.
and so you've had I don't know how many companies it is in total, but basically a handful of super large companies that control all the lobbying power
Hmm.
inside of the space, and because of that, they dictate, you know, basically what the farmer is growing. I mean, to some degree, the market's dictating that, but the companies are pigeonholing us with lobbying efforts inside Washington to grow certain species or crops in certain areas.
Yeah, and I just think it's, I don't know. With one of the guys at the conference, was he used the graph of kind of explaining basically the average price of commodities since like 1910 has continued to go down by 1% annually. So the average crop price has continued to decline on average 1%. Thank goodness that technology and farmers have just continued to innovate of, the crop output and productivity of a farm has also by acre increased 1.5%. So for every 1% loss there is in average commodity price, like commodities are not going up, people. Like commodities on a 100-year basis have continued to decline in price because we're growing more of them than we ever have. It's just natural supply and demand. But farmers have continued to produce just a 0.5% more than we're losing every year. So technically, you guys are at a 0.5% increase, and I'm totally stealing this from the graph. Cody Goins had this. He's with ROI Biologicals, super smart guy. Stole that from his graph, which he probably got from someone else, and we'll go on all that. I'll going over all that, but overall, farmers have been slowly increasing. But I think, the problem with this increase in productivity is that this increase in productivity has, like you said, become very dependent on a few companies to make that productivity happen. Like farms on average have increased in productivity, but we got seed traits, we've got chemicals, we've got machinery, we've got advanced technology, we've got all our herbicides, all that stuff helping increase. But the problem is that real actual patents and things that go on behind all that is really controlled by a handful of companies. And those companies have a lot of say in things like, hey, what can you grow? What are you gonna be able to grow? How can you still be profitable? And so I don't know. I'm looking at everything going on right now and I'm just getting super fired up about 2025. It's like I feel like there needs to be some sort of power shift in the way that the farm and ag economy in general works of the people who are controlling what goes on a farm and the people who are telling you how to run your farm don't actually farm anymore and they don't actually do this every day. The we were having a conversation about a certain large ag retailer, you and I were, that happens to post a lot of agronomy advice here and there, and it's like, well, obviously the answer is more inputs or apply more of this because you sell those inputs. It makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
and what I've appreciated about the Mutiny team and the reason I just keep bringing them up is because they look at that and say, well, that's not always the answer. Well, maybe there is something off of your soil. It's not just add more of this or add more of this to get to the right point. It's like, hey, just because we could doesn't mean that actually is the right move, and that doesn't mean we should sell you that. And that's how most ag retailers have operated. And that's how most any company in this space operates is, well, we can sell you something, so let's figure out how to sell it to you. Oh, I mean, you don't need a 400 horsepower tractor for your farm. Well, it'd be nice to have that extra 30, 40 horsepower when you could have done with a 370 machine, but 410 works just as well. It's like, hey, we'll take that extra $70,000, whatever we charge you for the chip tune.
Oh yeah, they're all great on upselling products. And I think especially, I mean, you're right. Like it say an input's only good if it returns investment for the farmer
Hmm.
that season, really. I mean, you can bank on the future somewhat, like when you apply lime or whatever, of the future return on investment from the lime that you apply to the soil. But if you were to just go out there and say, well, the farm needs 500 pounds of potash this year, according to the soil test, we're just going to throw 500 pounds of potash out, and of course, you're not going to get a return on investment on that, but the retailer is going to love it.
Hmm.
And yeah, that
And
tradition,
according to all the advice, that's what you should do.
sure.
Even though in reality, it's probably not actually a net positive for you. It's at best a break even.
Yeah, I mean, more than likely, it's going to hurt your bottom line because, I mean, even if it doesn't increase your yield, it probably won't significantly increase it enough to pay for the added investment in the extra fertilizer. And so, well, who won in that situation? Well, it wasn't you,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. And I just look at all this and I'm fired up because I'm sick of the farmer always being the last number in the equation or just the person you look at to adjust, hey, how much can we charge this person based on profit margin? I look at all that and it's time for the farmers to start winning more or the farmers start having more say in that. We've gone on many times this podcast about direct to consumer this and do this, but it's just like I just look at everything and it's like, man, things need to change. Like this is stupid. Like I was sitting in this meeting with a bunch of people who a lot of them I do respect, but some of them I'm just sitting there. I'm like, this was a giant high level conversation about agriculture and commodities. And I was like, the farmer had no voice in this conversation. It was a bunch of people talking about here's this gonna happen, here's this gonna happen. And I'm sitting here, it's like, how many of you have actually gone and sat down across from a farmer and asked them what they think about this? Or hey, what would benefit them? It was all these things are happening up here, blah, 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 government this, blah, 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 this, and that. And it was like, okay, have you actually talked to any farmers about this? You're all voicing your opinions based on your thoughts and opinions of an article you read or a judgment that you have, but you never actually considered the people who this affects the most. And it was just super frustrating. I was like, why am I sitting here? I had my microphone on mute the whole time, and I was just like, it felt wrong, And I almost piped up at the end of it, and I said, no, Clayton, hold your tongue. Don't be that guy. Don't get kicked off the call because you just get all angry and everything. But I was sitting there, I was like, man, there are things in this industry that are really they just frustrate me. And I feel like we don't talk about those things enough. We don't talk about how the farmer is the person who makes all this go around. When farmers lose, the country loses. When farmers lose, the culture loses. And so if the farmers are continually losing, well, we are not heading in a good direction. And so what are we actually doing to listen to the people who are making this country awesome? Well, the farmers, I'm at the point now where I truly believe agriculture and farmers and ranchers are the ones who are the growing grounds for the rest of American culture. And so as we see that decline, we are going to slowly see the decay of everything else. And I think we have seen that from the decay of rural communities to the decay of society at large. I would not say we are at a net positive based on the reduction in amount of people on farms or the reduction of just interaction with agriculture. I think we are at quite a large net loss because of that.
Yeah, I think you're seeing like the downfall of the rural communities is the erosion of the our country at large. Really, I mean, you have seen society take a nosedive as the rural communities have been eroded,
Hmm.
um, and people have left the farms and have gone into the cities. And not to say that there's anything wrong with living in a city, but we need strong towns in our rural
Hmm.
communities too.
Yeah, and ag is the primary provider of that. And I will say there is an interesting conversation when we start talking about tariffs that we love to talk about. We'll see what actually happens. But tariffs, we throw tariffs into the equation. Okay, tariffs overall have not been good for ag in the past. Trump did a pretty good job of taking care of people last time and all of that. Like it wasn't the end of the world. This time it might be a little different. And tariffs, if it is done well, might actually act as a net positive for rural communities, even if it's not a net positive for the community within that small town. So I have no idea what's going to happen there. I like paying for U.S. made goods, but I know most of America could care less about the money they spend and where it's spent. Whether that's China or Indonesia or Mexico, they just care that they get something that doesn't suck for a reasonable price.
Yeah. I hope with as we get the new administration in there, and we do have some different thoughts about how to produce food in America, and like I'm excited to hear maybe there's some opportunity there for some fresh food networks,
Hmm.
for refrigeration, to be maybe subsidized by the government,
Hmm.
uh, so the fresh food that's coming out of these farms. Uh, Especially in the rural areas right now that aren't raising fresh food, um, they have to be able to cool it, down pretty rapidly to get the food to just not spoil super
Hmm.
fast. And then, along with that, they have to have a processing facility pretty close. And that way, there's a portion that you can sell fresh, but there's also a portion that is fresh food that can be canned and then, sold that's maybe not quite as good as and nutritious as the day you pick it, but it's still better than eating a processed food. And I hope, like, if those new systems are established, that brings in new opportunity for young people and
Hmm.
also for people in large commodity ag that are ready to diversify, or they're just ready to break away from the cycle of commodity ag
Oh
just
yeah.
because it's just unsustainable long term.
And yeah, and I mean, I really think, you and I both know how bloated the USDA's budget is. I mean, nationwide, the USDA has so much under its umbrella, and there are just so many grants that you've benefited from them. I'm probably going to benefit from them. There's so many grants that people don't know are available through the USDA, and I would love, should government efficiency actually become a thing. I'm doubtful of that. But should RFK come in and say, "Hey, I do really care about the health of the U.S. Citizen," okay, well, great. Let's shift some of our USDA funding to let's cut back on solar. Let's cut back on the funding for solar. Let's cut back on all the needless expenses and grants there, and let's funnel that into local food systems, local supply chains to get. Hey, say you live an hour and a half from Nashville. Okay, let's work on. Hey, let's subsidize some of these logistics. Guys, people want cheap food, and no matter where you stand on subsidies, I mean, subsidies do help keep cost of production lower, and they also just are a blanket. And if we're gonna have a bad year in row crops, there's no reason a bad year in direct to consumer can't also benefit from that. I think there's a real opportunity. I don't think farm bill spending is going to decline a ton. I think it probably will a little if they ever want to get the farm bill through. That's a whole nother conversation. But I do think there's a real opportunity to build these local supply systems and actually do it in a way that's helpful for people. I mean, if I could get a grant or even a super low interest loan for $10,000 to $20,000 to start some sort of small scale farming operation to do direct to consumer. I mean, that's super appealing for a young guy like me who would want to be in farming, and that's the whole other thing too. That's another topic we can get into. But there's a younger generation, and there are people who I do think crave to be in this industry, but the path forward to get there is a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And I think there's so much opportunity there to solve some real big problems in that space.
Yeah, kind of what I would like to see is like grower co-ops established where the government was providing maybe it's one central cold storage facility, uh, and and maybe it's in conjunction with some private ownership or whatever. But also you have the processing facility right there, and maybe you have a group of 20 growers, and then you could take as many else others on that could uh, grow like quality products. So if the co-op started out with 20, but then you had 10 small farms spring up over here, 2 or 3 acres apiece, that could grow uh, like quality produce, then they could join the co-op, and then you've gone from that small network of 20 to maybe 5 or 10 more. So now it's 30 growers, and it just continues to grow. You're able to cover a larger footprint,
Yeah.
and I think.
I've heard of guys doing that with beef processing facilities where it's just the point where it's like they're so sick of the big four where it's like, well, let's all pool together a couple $100,000 and let's build something. Like
Yeah.
let's build our own facility. If a bunch of us go in together as co-owners on this, it actually might be viable.
I'm no technical like chart guy, but I'll bet you if you could see a chart of fresh food and people's health, uh, the like as you increased in fresh food, I'll bet you the correlation to health is uh, very stark.
Oh, I
Like,
think there's a direct. I don't have any data like you said, but I mean, I have slowly cut back on processed foods this year and tried to really focus on being healthier just in the way I live. As I sit here drinking a Red Bull, but I've cut back on a lot of that, and I look at that and I'm like, I feel more energetic. I feel when I go and eat McDonald's or I go drink a Dr. Pepper, I feel like crap.
yeah.
Your body, the way your body reacts to those things over a long period of time, I think we just become accustomed to it.
Well,
You garden, you know.
sure. I mean, we shouldn't eat the trans fatty acids. We shouldn't eat all them highly processed oils, and I mean, there's all kinds of preservatives in that kind of stuff as well. So tons of stuff we shouldn't be eating. So that's got to have a bad effect on your health. And the government's spending so much money now on healthcare. Um, like some of that money could probably be diverted into the fresh food networks, and it would be a net gain,
Yeah, we
probably.
don't need to subsidize healthcare. We need to subsidize healthy food.
That's right. Subsidize healthy food, and then the healthcare won't be needed on the
We
backside.
sound like a bunch of socialists right now. My goodness. Government, why don't you just start growing our food? You'll solve all our problems, which by the way is everything I'm completely against. Like I'm not like listen, the true answer to all this is everyone in America being willing to spend 30% of their budget on food. So that way growers make money, you get healthier food, the government stays less involved. But I think I'm just going to have to let that ship sail because I just don't think that because you know this. I mean, I've talked about this on here before. Most of the world, that's the average spend, if not more, is 30+% of your budget, and most of the world is spent on your food because they're less industrialized. They're more local food systems. They don't have a grocery store they can usually just go to. No, they go to a market to get their food and they buy it directly from the people who grew it. Obviously, it's going to be a little more expensive because it's not at scale. And because of the we're so lucky to have scale in agriculture that has brought our food prices way down. It means that you farmer can produce 10x what your grandparents did, but that comes at the cost of hey, maybe this is a little less healthy. And not even maybe, it is. It
Oh,
is
for
it
sure.
is
Like,
less healthy. There are trade-offs to everything. And I'm not saying I think Walmart should always have full shelves. I think that is a blessing that we have in America that we take for granted. COVID made everyone realize that. Like full shelves in Walmart is the sign of a prosperous culture, and that is a good thing. With that said, you shouldn't eat only all your food from Walmart, in my personal opinion. You know,
no, I agree. And, for a healthy society to happen, we're going to have, like, we've gone so far away from healthy food. Now we got a good portion of the people that, one, they don't know how to grow food, and two, they can't because they don't have land. Um, but so, I mean, some way we're going to have to get back to a fresh food culture or at least less processed food culture. Um,
and I think it's coming. I think it is. I mean,
well, the
if there's anything that the whole RFK movement has done, love him or hate him, and even California, as a former Californian, like man, they are conscious of it, and even if they're wrong about quite a handful of things, uh, there is a point to it. And I live in the heart of the Midwest where no one gives a rip. They'll drink a full size soda every single day without any second thought, and it just that and I've like slowly cut out sugar from like all of my diet and done all this, but like I see that and I'm like it's gonna make its way into the center of the country, and everyone's gonna be concerned about the health of their food.
Yeah, I had a friend that that told me not too long ago. He said, there was such a humongous movement against cigarettes when it came out, that how unhealthy they were for you. He said he thinks sugar. Um,
Oh, sugar's the next thing
it's
for
that he
sure.
said that's the next big domino to fall. And like when he said it, it kind of shocked me. But then after I thought about it, I was like, it causes so much heart disease and, uh, I
Well,
mean, you
and for
name
the
it down the
longest time,
list, diabetes and
for the longest time, it was you were told it was the fat on your meat and the red meat that gave you heart disease, and now we're realizing, oh, maybe it's actually the large amount of corn syrup we put in everything. Maybe it's the fact that you know you can eat something that has a large amount of fat on it. It's not actually bad for you. It's the soda you drink after. And I challenge anyone listening to this, like, go a week with zero sugar in your diet for the first 3 days. You'll hate it because you will notice, oh man, I just am craving something sweet right now. And then you go a week and then you're like, oh, I could actually live without that and I feel more energetic. And then you go and you try some sugar and then boom, you're just like
hopelessly addicted
you're
again.
hopelessly addicted, but you also feel like crap, but you still want
Oh,
more.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like after I eat something that's high in sugar, it definitely like, I mean, you can tell your body feels terrible.
Yeah, and I'm not saying cut like get rid of sugar when you're cooking, but I'm saying like drinking a drinking something that has 37 grams of sugar in it. Guys, measure out 37 grams of sugar and put it next to your can of Coke or whatever, and man, it will blow your mind of what's just like imagine just like sitting that on your tongue. And
Yeah, just
oh,
spooning it down. That's like a sweet tea. Like, I love to drink it, like, initially, and then after I drink it, I'm like, why did I do
oh
that?
yeah,
You know,
a good old Chick-fil-A sweet tea. Oh man,
it just brutalize you.
it's good until it's not, and then
Yeah.
you're just I can't even finish it. It's crazy, and mind you, yeah, I could go on about this all day. And but the thing is that I think that is going to have major ramifications for agriculture. If that sort of stuff does happen, it's going to have major ramifications within the opportunity in local food, but also, man, like I'm not, and this is once again a hot take. Row crops always going to be a thing. Mass scale agriculture is always going to be. Man, I really sound like a socialist right
I
now.
mean, we got to feed animals. So,
Yeah, we got
so
it. Yeah, it's always going to be there. I think the way we think about, let's just grow more corn, let's just grow more soybeans is going to change a little.
it's got to. I mean, we have got to get, like, I
Also,
think the row crop farmers need something else.
and guys, let's be honest. And this is 100% from a guy who doesn't like want to bash ethanol at all or anything like that. But man, how long does ethanol have? Like, how long does the ethanol industry? How long do we think it's actually going to be around? Biodiesel, I think, has a very realistic future. The math for ethanol, I just don't think it adds up, and I don't know how long the lobbyists are going to be able to hold off, cutting out ethanol production.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's,
And mind you, take this from a guy who knows very little about the ethanol industry. Just from my quick readings and just my general observations of it, I'm like, I don't know if it's worth our time.
I think here's what it is. It's like, it depends on the administration that's in there,
Uh-huh.
and that's very difficult to sustain anything like that long term. Just because there's no ever consensus on decision making, and how hard is it for any company to survive if they don't have a way to know which way to point their company?
Hmm.
So, like, just that alone makes it very difficult to be sustainable long term.
Hmm.
Not to mention that it requires so much energy to produce a gallon of fuel.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is when it comes to ethanol, you look at the energy production, and you're just like, I don't know if this. I mean, is this really better than just pulling oil out of the ground? I mean, oil's very efficient. I think that's where you starting to do stuff with canola. I think biodiesel has a lot more opportunity. I know we just got a crush plant near us to start doing biodiesel. Like the opportunities there, I think, are probably just because of how heavily diesel is used across the board, across the country. Ethanol is kind of one of those things. Like I think it's got its place. I know Deere. I think Deere's got a 100% ethanol engine that they just revealed. Maybe, man, I don't know if it's 100% ethanol. Super clean burning engine, super fascinating stuff. And if they can make it work better than diesel, I'm all for it. But I look at stuff like that. I'm like, man, we got these. Like I've said it before, we've got a lot of these parts of the commodity market that are huge and massive and billions of dollars in revenue running through these companies a year that are more or less propped up on sticks of legislation that can change in 4 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that change and a lot of fluctuations there that once again, getting back to my main point is that it doesn't leave the farmer any control in that. You're at the mercy of where can you drop your grain off? Like Neil, where can you drive to drop your corn and your soybeans and your wheat? Like that you've got those are your options, unless you're going to start getting into brokering all your own freight and everything. Like and there's people who get into that where it's like, hey, I started working with this flour mill here, or I started doing, working with this feedlot here. We just take it directly to them. But most of it's done by brokers or advisors or large commodity organizations where you sign a contract with Bunge and they just take it from there. They give you your dollars and then they market and sell it all over the world, which is great. But you're at the control of, hey, what price will they give you, or what price can this other guy give you? It's a, it's not something that I think most farmers actually enjoy when they really think about it. It's like, and I thought about this the other day. It's like people love to complain about subsidies, but like, if your income fluctuated based on the weather, how would you feel about that? Would you want, me running a company that's done most of our work's done on a computer? If it rained too much or it was too dry of a year and our income was fluctuated by it, that would suck. I'd probably feel a little cheated, even though, like obviously, I, we have variables we control. There's variables you guys can't control. That just makes me think, man, this just something feels off. We've kind of let farming become this pigeonholed thing of like, here's your categories that you can go into, and if you don't do those, you can't make money. There's a few unicorns who make it out, but it is not easy to make it out. And I look at that and I'm like, man, why do we all just say this is how it is and this is how it has to stay?
I think
And you're older and wiser than I, so you probably have.
no, I know, I totally agree. I mean, I think, a lot of people will say, well, you could grow anything you wanted. You could grow fresh food, or you guys could grow fresh food, and you choose not to. You choose to grow corn and beans and wheat. Um, but my rebuttal to that would be just one, it requires a lot of setup to get your farm ready to be able to grow said fresh food.
Well, I mean,
And
we
then
talked about doing flour, and I think we still want to do it, but it's just like the process is. I mean, the startup costs, honestly, from what we look at low, the regulation and the 56-page book we have to read just to store it. It's like, how do you do that reasonably when you also have to make sure you survive another year?
that's the big thing, Like, can you survive the setup cost? And then, but because you have to have an established market, especially to sell fresh food into. Now, once it's refrigerated and then it's processed down a little bit and canned or bagged, you have more time. You have a little bit more shelf life. I mean, it still needs to get out there fairly rapidly. But if you don't have an established market ready for that said product, and bore all the setup costs for these systems, like you might not make it. It
Yeah.
might drag you under, and so that's why corn and bean farmers and wheat farmers and whatever niche commodity you're in whatever state is just because those systems have been set up over the last 100 years, and they don't have a lot of choice.
Yeah. And my question, and it this is probably a bad comparison, but you look at the American Revolution and look at that, like, where do you draw the line of saying this is stupid and this is enough? Like, I want control of my own farm. I want, especially on years like this where it's just like everyone just seems depressed all the time. It's like, okay, well, we knew this was coming, but we don't have control over it. So those of you who have control over it, how are you adjusting? Well, you're increasing your prices, or you're just increasing your marketing because, oh, you have a direct to consumer good. Well, let's spend a little extra on marketing and see if we can sell some more product, see if we can pick up some of these things. And, you know, once again, I don't want to say I know everything. I know nothing. I am just an arrogant fool sitting on a microphone. But at what point do we as an industry say, we've had enough of this, let's start changing this? And how do we go about changing that? And that is something that I don't have the answers to, and I don't think anyone does, but we have to, at least as a whole, or at least a lot of us, say, this is enough. How can we bring power back to the farm and bring, some level of autonomy back to the decision makers, who are really growing the food every day? Not the decision makers who are sitting in an office, but the decision makers who actually are doing the work and actually working the land, because they're the ones who are completely responsible for the sustainability of their farm. They're the ones completely responsible for the health of the crop, and they are the ones completely responsible for making sure that their small business stays running, supporting you, your family, and the community around you. Because when that starts to fall apart, everything else starts to fall apart. And I think we're moving towards a point where it's like the variables are continuing to be taken out of control of the farmer's hand. It's like, man, it's just like, and not even nowadays, it's like you don't even have land. You have landlords. You don't even have your own land. It's like, okay, I'm now at the mercy of the cash rent price, whatever they set this year, or whatever the guy next down the road will bid against me. And it's just like,
Yeah, at this point, you have large, multinational corporations buying humongous tracts of land in super, highly productive areas. Well, I mean, you can see the end game on this one.
well, I mean, and and I've speculated this before, and I don't even think it's a speculation anymore. We're entering bubble stage here pretty soon, where cash rents aren't going to cash flow the mortgage payment that a lot of these people like. We are moving towards this point where we've bought up, specifically investors have bought up so much land, and their only guarantee to make a profit is selling it to another investor, not the farmer, another investor. And so if that land itself cannot sustain itself with the farming and cash rent going on it, well, man, we've set ourselves up for a massive floor that's about to crash because, well, you can only subsidize land for so long before you get sick of it. But then you go to sell it, and if there's no one there to sell it to because they've made the same realization you have, that does puts farmers with a little bit of cash in the bank in a good spot, but not people who've got a 20-year mortgage left. It's,
which is a big part of farming America, really, and especially in the next 20 years, as really the largest landowners begin to die off that
uh-huh.
are still on the farm, because a lot of the land ownership has gone off the farm, but
Mhm.
you still have a significant portion of the land owned by an elderly owner,
Yep.
and in the next 20 years, those people are going to begin to die, and I mean, I think there's only a handful of people in position that are still on the farms to be able to financially retain the land or expand. Um, and then the rest of that land is going to be owned by more corporations or off farm ownership.
And that's the other thing too. We used to live in a world where you just, it got passed down to the people who were farming it. You figured it out when the next person died, and it just got passed down to the next. But we're officially at the point where a lot of people want out, and that brings me to the second very important thing that I think needs to be addressed is 2 years ago when I started doing this, the conversation about labor shortage was a thing, but no one was actually worried about it. Oh, we'll just get more H2A workers. Oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And it's like the time I think is officially coming next year and in the next few years where we're out of farm kids. There are no more farm kids coming back to the farm, guys. We're officially, I think, starting to run out of people. Like if say a farmer had 4 children and 3 of them got off farm jobs, usually one would come back. I think that fourth has officially made the decision. They're not coming back, and that sets up a lot of problems with inheritance. That sets up a lot of problems with labor if things actually getting done, and that sets up a huge, huge land transfer to the next generation in a way that's not going to be more farms, but it's going to be more auctions, and that's a scary reality, and that's happening in the next year to 5 years.
Yeah, I want like I was thinking about this today. I was driving back and forth to the granary, and I was thinking like as sitting here as a farmer and knowing, I mean, I'm seeing a lot in, like, I'm not talking about here in our specific county, but just in our region as a whole. Uh, and we live in a 3 or 4 state region where I can see a lot of farms on different states, but all pretty close to my
Yeah, shout
geography.
out shout out to the Three Rivers confluence. Like this area, I tell people all the time, it's probably the coolest agriculture, just total side note, the coolest agriculture area I've ever traveled to. And I've been to a lot of places this year. The diversity of farms, the progressive farmers here, you would never hear about in the news, but man, there's a lot of them and it's cool.
It is. It's a neat area. You can go potatoes, southeast Missouri, the vineyards of southern Illinois, the bottomlands and low-lying hills of Kentucky, and then the cotton farms in West Tennessee.
You got
Yeah,
rice
rice in
across. Yep.
Arkansas
Yep.
and Missouri and Illinois. So yeah, super diverse.
Canola.
Yeah, canola, wheat. A lot of double crops. We also have watermelons and yeah. So you could go on and on about that. Yeah.
Total side note. But anyways, go on.
I love to brag on our area. What were we talking about? I so
You're
lost.
just thinking while driving.
Oh, yeah, but I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
We're running out of farm kids.
Oh, right, oh, for sure the lack of labor. But I was thinking about like as you know, like say machines for instance, as they increase in price tag. So we have sprayers now that are costing 5, 7, 800,000, $1 million. Combines, probably one of the cheaper ones you can get now, 750,000. All upwards to 1.2, 1.3 million. Same way with cotton harvesters and um, you wonder at what
Yeah, I
point.
remember when people used to look at cotton harvesters that cost $1 million, and they're like, most expensive machine I've ever seen.
Yeah,
No.
and now like like if you're looking at a you know 8 class Deere or case, you're pushing right at $1 million, and then if you move up to the bigger machines like that, you are exceeding $1 million.
Mhm.
But they're both right there at the cusp of it, just an astronomical amount of money, and we see them now increasing in price, between 7 and 15% a year. Like, as that happens, do the farms consolidate, or do they just toss their hands up in the air and say, at what point is it even worth it anymore? And they begin this. I guess I guess they consolidate at that point by just because they sold and their neighbor that is decided to assume the risk takes it on. But I kind of wonder, will there be consolidation among neighbors on purpose to be able to create more um, diverse family looks where you maybe have one. Uh,
I can answer that question for you right now. I mean, maybe not around this region. You'll meet Scott. He'll be at FarmCon with us, but their two family operations merged because they just got to the point everything's so they realized the way to keep going was to merge and bring their land and their resources together, and they've got their own ways they work it out and everything. I've met several merged family operations that either it was a married thing and the two families came together, or just two people who realized their businesses aligned well. It was like we can't. They realized they couldn't keep doing this alone, and the way to keep going was to expand through merging. Because that gives you a lot more. It gives you access to more capital. Gives you access to you can now buy the larger machine and farm more ground without having to go out and spend $10 million on more ground. Like it makes a lot of sense. But once again, now we're moving towards, okay, well, we function as an organization, not a family farm. We're functioning, okay, we've got the family, we've got a couple employees, we've got our own LLC, we operate the equipment's in here and here and here, which is not a bad thing, I don't think by any means, but it does change the dynamic a lot of how you work and how you run things.
Sure, you have more like a CEO type person running the business at that point. Like you have a dedicated manager to the. I mean, you already do, but I mean, I'm talking like he's managing almost like a corporation level of
hmm
a
And,
business.
and there's a lot of benefits that come with that because, okay, well, because we have larger working capital, let's get health insurance for our employees. Oh, hey, we actually can act more as a business, but more or less the 100-year legacy those families might have. Well, now they share that 100-year legacy with someone else. And that's where the real loss of things was. And I just think I think we're in this spot where it's like, man, the 100-year farms they're not a lot of them aren't going to be here for another 100, and that's sad, and that's a
It,
problem. And I just look at all this and it's like, man, this sucks. And
it
we throw our hands in the air. It's like we just throw our hands in the air and say, well, it's just how it is. Just gonna keep going another year. And yes, keep going another year, but how can we as a community go another year better? How can we, rather than accept the loss, figure out how to win? You know?
that's what I look at. At thinking about that on the way home, it was like you really, for I was thinking about this. And because I was texting with Gabe Neal from Texas, just uh, right before we come on the podcast, and he was saying, I don't know if America has the will, uh, basically, to allow farms to be sustainable. He says, I feel like we want to grow houses instead, and
And
I just,
where's he out of? Is he near like a pretty heavy development area?
yeah, West Texas, so I assume, just some of the Texas cities growing out,
I mean,
and
every time I fly out of Dallas, I just feel
yeah,
like
it's just
I
massive.
feel like I see another 20 miles of concrete.
Sure, it's just expanding like ever never ending expansion or whatever, But I mean, you think, and will my kids want to farm like I farm now? For the next 20 years, I can't imagine anybody wanting to do what like 20 years ago farming. When I was in farming, was I enjoyed myself and I had a lot of spare time. Now, like I seem like I scramble for everything, and it's just because they've well, lack of labor is one, like I was in a semi till I come into the podcast, um, and but it's just it's becomes like the margins are so thin, you have to work constantly to make sure that you're turning a profit, you
hmm
know, and I think it's become unenjoyable.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and the problem is, it's like, and like I said, like the labor thing, like everyone's answer is H2A. We'll run out of H2A workers at some point. I don't think we're ever going to work. I don't think we're ever going to run out of people who want to come to this country because I do think we still overall as a country have the best economy in the world. It's easy to do well here, if you put a little effort in, and if you've ever worked hard in your life, you don't think that, but man, you put a little effort into a lot of places. You can go places in this country. Most immigrants understand that, but you know, even now, I've heard horror stories about H2A. It's like, yeah, you get one good one and you get three bad ones, and you just have to figure it out. And you get locked into these contracts, and they get complicated, things like that. And so, we're just moving into this age of agriculture where a lot of farmers hate their job. A lot of farmers don't want to keep farming, but they feel like they have to. Like I am, there's a new book I started reading. It was just published. It's called what's it? Dirt Rich, Cash Poor. Just came out. And that I think that's the sentiment a lot of people, the eldest son or just the person who keeps farming, whether they want to or not. By the time they're in their mid 20s, they feel like they have to stay because there is 100 years riding on their
Sure.
shoulders, and that is incredibly stressful to feel the 100 year family run farm, like that weight is all on your shoulders, and that if you fail, your entire family will look down on you.
Yeah, and
And we wonder why suicide is so high in the ag
oh,
industry.
no doubt.
Man, it is no man. I run my own business, and my family could give less than a rip about my business, I think. But man, just the weight of that alone, I could not imagine 100 years behind me of my great grandfather, my grandfather, and my father looking at what I do, even if they're not there, saying, "You better keep that going." Like that imagined pressure. I cannot imagine how hard that is.
And I think what's so difficult about it too is say you're the guy in the position of leadership whenever there was 5 years of drought, or even 3 years of drought with suppressed commodity prices, where you made great management decisions, you worked your butt off, and you still lost the farm,
Hmm.
and there wasn't anything that you could have done to make it rain on that piece of property,
Yep.
so you could have turned a profit on it.
Well, those of us who don't live around irrigation.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Like if you can flip the switch, it's different. You should have went out there and flipped the switch, but you know, I
Well,
mean, if you're in a dry land area, which the majority of the country is, and you couldn't force it to rain, you're just housed, and then you take the fall, um, and it's the family's loss too. But I mean, it is like it wasn't really not much you could have done about it.
And man, that just it just angers me. I'm sitting in the car. I don't even farm. I don't even farm. I want more than anything to be able to farm again. That has been like I've been in the office for 4 weeks, and I'm just like, I just want to drive a tractor or go work some cattle. I'm tired of this. And I'm sitting here thinking, is like, I have it so good. My business is very controllable. Even in a down ag economy, we've continued to like grow and like sustain. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, the people who I actually care about, the people who I care about, and the reason I got into this are getting shafted, and they're getting treated like crap, and they feel like they have no power, and that's stupid, and it pisses me off. I was sitting here excited and pissed, and I was like, excited and pissed and curious about next year and everything. But it's just like things have to change, guys. This industry is the greatest industry on the planet, and we just let these things happen over and over and over again. And at what point do we say enough is enough? Farmers, let's put you in charge again. What needs to change to make that happen? What can we do to help? What can you do to change your circumstances? What can companies around you and the companies you choose to work with help with? Guys, stop giving your money to crappy companies. That's first of all, number one. Don't spend money with companies that don't have your best interest at heart. But also, like, man, this industry is the greatest industry on earth, and we are losing the heart of America slowly but surely. It is dying, and we are doing nothing to change it. So, what the crap are we going to do, people?
I agree. I mean, and you just and this is the thing, you just beat your head up against the wall. It's like, what can we do? Like, what do we need to do to change? Well, I think you first you got to get a discussion started with a lot of smart people and come up with some options, and then put those boots to the ground and let's get working on it.
Yeah, and that's our open invite to anyone who is listening to this or watching this right now. Let me redo that. This is my open invite to anyone watching this or listening to this. Guys, if you want to see this industry change for the better, get a hold of Neil or me. Get on this podcast. Get on my podcast. Get on a phone call with us. Let's figure something out. I spend so much of my time dealing with an industry that more or less, and this is not farmers, this is just the ag business world in general, that really doesn't actually care. And I'm getting fed up with that. And if you're one of my customers listening to this, don't worry. If we're still working with you, it's because we like you. And if we're not working with you, there's a reason. You know, we care so much about this industry and we want it to change for the better. And that is going to be my goal next year. It's just like you said, we got to have conversations about this. We got to get a lot of smart people together. I'm not saying I'm one of them. I'm not. But we got to get a lot of people who are smart, but more importantly, people who are willing to make a hard decision, even if it doesn't make sense right now. And that's what this industry needs. It needs people willing to look 50 years down the road and say, do our kids want to be on this farm still? And what are we going to do now to make sure that our kids and our grandkids have that opportunity and don't have to deal with the crap we do? And that's just what I'm looking at. It's like we got bigger farms, we got smaller profit margins, we got crops that a lot of people enjoy growing, but some people just are tired of it too. It's like, what can we do differently to change this industry and change this country for the better? I mean, the worst thing that could ever happen to us as a country is for us to lose agriculture and start relying on other countries to produce our food. And that's the 50 100 year outlook currently, I think, is
I,
letting things continue to slide into a place where we might grow a few crops here and there, but our primary agriculture industry is imports, and that is a scary, scary world.
yeah, I think, like if we continue down the path we're continuing down, it's just a consumption like culture, where there isn't it's all processed. We're almost there right now. And and there is no option other than to be in a processed food industry. And that's a scary future to me, and it's unsustainable for the American farm family. Uh,
It's unsustainable for America. I mean that 100% puts our ability to survive in someone else's hand, and that is just not a world we want to live in. We in the U.S. have probably the most valuable land in terms of commodities, in terms of crops, and commodities in terms of mining. Our engineering capabilities, uh, we have that now still. If we don't look out for ourselves, we're not going to have that. If we continue to build an Amazon warehouse over every single acre we have, that's not a world that I want to live in. I
no,
don't want to live in a world where for me to go touch dirt, I have to go pay the national parks $15 to get in. I want to be able to walk out my back door and see a farm field. I want to be able to drive to my neighbor's house 30 minutes away and see their garden. I want to be able to meet a farmer who lives 30 minutes away and be able to see their farm and see where my food comes from. I don't want to live in a world where it takes me 3 hours to get out of a city just to see dirt. That's not a world we want to live in. And that's not a world we want to, yeah, we don't, that's a loss. That's such a big loss. And we don't talk about that enough of like, we're losing so much if we lose ag, and we're losing so much if we don't make a change. And I'm not saying this would be a doomsday or either. I'm saying this because I ain't quitting until I'm dead. Like, there's days where I think about selling this business and going and retiring on a farm by myself in the middle of nowhere where no one can bother me. But that wouldn't be actually solving any problems. That would be quitting. And I'm not going to quit because there are things that need to change for the better. And I will get riled up about this and I'll get pissed about it because until we start having conversations like this at a high level, then no one's going to listen. Like we have so many cool opportunities because of this podcast, because of Instagram, because of YouTube, and that needs to be leveraged for the better. Anyone who has any sort of like opportunity to have an audience like this, I mean, man, like there is real opportunity, and I think we've been shortchanging it. I think we have, you and I specifically, we have some very lucky capabilities because of the company we run and like just what we've been able to do this year. Like it'd be a shame to let that go to waste with just saying it is how it is. Farming is the way it is how it is. And so
no, I think I'm an advocate. I want to be an advocate for the change, for the better, for the American farmer, and for the just American consumer as a whole. I mean, and this is the great thing in Kentucky. We have Jonathan Shell, our ag commissioner, and he's got a new campaign called "Food is Medicine," and where he's generally like taking and making a concerted effort to develop these small systems of fresh food, into our schools and into our hospitals, so that fresh food can then, improve the health of those people. And I think if we could look at that and then add to it as a nation or as a region, that's fantastic. And I hope in the process of that, it begins to reinvigorate the hope of the American commodity producer, where maybe he doesn't completely because we're always going to need commodities. We
Yeah,
have chickens and hogs, and you know that's a good part of agriculture,
yes,
but
yeah.
we need additional markets,
Diversification. We need
diversification.
diversification. There's no reason you can't farm 5,000 acres and five and be equally profitable in both of them. You know, there you can do a lot with 5 acres when you also farm 5,000. You have a garden, be able to farm 5,000 and grow an awesome garden in your free time's great. Imagine if you could turn that into a small business where it's like, hey, honestly, yeah, we make a crap ton of money technically because of 5,000 acres, but profitability wise, well, obviously we're making more on products that we can set the price for. That doesn't mean you have to get rid of either. There's so much cool flexibility there.
Sure, you can still have your huge commodity farm, but you devote a portion of that into fresh food. And hey, we have a co-op system set up over here, so you have a ready market. Like if you can't sell that fresh food that week, there's a plan for it. It goes into cold storage. It goes into a can. It goes into a bag. It makes it into Walmart or Super Value or Kroger or whichever. And i- it's still a nutritious food. It's just frozen,
Hmm. And
and
yeah,
that creates opportunity for new workers. Um,
so many new workers.
Manufacturing, because they have to manufacture all these cold storage units and food processing, and it just it I feel like it could revitalize our economy,
100%.
and our rural areas, could be revitalized. And I mean, we all need to see that.
Yeah, and I always obviously I'm a little biased, but I truly believe agriculture as an industry has the opportunity to not just change our health, but change the entire way we view our our environment, our food, and more importantly, I think it really does have the power to revitalize so much of America. Man, I when you just think about it, you step onto a 5,000 acre grain farm, $1 million combine, $100,000 in tractors, a bunch of chemicals and seed you know nothing about because it's been engineered beyond belief. Man, that's intimidating for anyone wanting to even think about farming. Oh man, they also run a 5 acre produce farm that they walk through every day and pull weeds. They have to do little minor, not minor, miniature farm tasks. Which one's more intimidating and easier for someone to get into? If you were a college student saying, "Hey, I want to get into agriculture, but I don't know what to do," would you be more intimidated walking through a vegetable field or stepping into $1 million combine? Probably the vegetable field. Man, that barrier to entry just boom, super lowered. And man, also, what a better way to get some manual labor? Interns. Oh my gosh, interns make the world go round. Thank you, interns. But man, there's so many cool opportunities to teach young people how to farm in a way that could actually tangibly change the future. And yeah, I mean, imagine rebuilding. We have very scaled supply chains right now. Imagine building those supply chains at 1/100th of the scale in towns across America. I mean,
I honestly do think it would reconnect people with nature in one thing,
mhm.
and then teach them how to grow food. It gives them a skill, so it gives them confidence, and it also builds that love of production, agriculture, and which we need. We need more farmers coming into this space. Like you don't want to see that knowledge held in such a small group of folks. And, I mean,
Mhm.
and they're aging too. I mean, once we lose that knowledge base, it's not like it's recorded, And there is other people coming up alongside those people, but
Yeah,
it's
you
less
can't you can't trust the universities to tell you everything you need to know about farming. You need guys who have done it for 50, 60 years.
in that certain micro climate, because every climate is a little bit different and practices have to vary because the climate is so different in each area. And what works really good in one spot might not work 22 miles away. And the intellectual knowledge that certain farmer holds in that certain micro climate is uh, extremely valuable, And before that happens, it's just to me a shame that we aren't already developing these systems so that intellectual knowledge is not dead when that begins to happen, if it if it's going to.
Yeah, and I yeah, and I'm gonna need to go soon. I gotta drive back to Iowa tonight. But to wrap this up, I once again, it's easy. I say all the doomsday things not as fear mongering, but as stressing the severity of the situation to hopefully inspire us to make a change, myself included. Um, I am wearing jeans that were made from U.S. cotton and made in a U.S. factory, employed U.S. workers, complete U.S. supply chain. I'm wearing a sweatshirt that started as wool on a sheep in Montana and then was shipped to a different factory in the US and then shipped to a different factory in the US and then shipped to a warehouse in the US and shipped to me. The beauty of all that is all these never left the country. These things touch probably 5 to 7, if not 10 plus different Americans' hands while being made to get to me. Those people have jobs, they can eat. The farmer and the rancher made some money because they sold a product. And you know what? This is the best clothing I own. And I am so happy with it. And you know what? I paid a little extra for it. And I say this as an example because it's not our food, but it is US Ag. Man, I love wearing this, not just because it's a great product, but because I know that this was built with care, it was crafted with pride, and that this is something that benefited other people that I could shake their hand one day. Not some massive billionaire corporation that builds things in China for 30 cents and then charges $30 for it for me. No, this is a prime example of the fact that the US supply chain can be rebuilt, it can be done. And as companies like this grow and as supply chains like this grow, they get cheaper. Things like this get cheaper. I'm happy to spend the extra money now knowing that this helps. Same with our food system is there are people who are trying. There are people across the country doing things like this who are doing it with our food. They're doing it with cows. They're doing it with pigs. It exists. It is happening. The change is coming. So my question is, are we going to let them struggle or are we going to say, hey, we could do something like that too? Or are we going to look at them and say, that's a good idea. I want to put my own spin on it. Or you look at all that and say, I'm going to do something completely different because I'm absolutely crazy. Let's do something. Let's change the world. So that's my challenge to anyone listening. Agriculture has the power to not just change your life, my life, the people who eat the food's life. It has the power to completely reshape this country because it is what helped shape this country. This country was founded by people who said they wanted a big change. And you know what? It was settled by a bunch of people who moved across the country, staked a piece of land, and they said, we're going to make our living off this land. And that country still exists today. And there's still opportunity to see it completely change the world again. So don't be defeated. Don't be broken down. Let's change the world. Let's do something. If you got questions, if you have ideas, just call us. Just call us, get on this podcast, message us on Instagram, do all that stuff because it's time for something big to happen. And I'm so done waiting around.
I can see it. I really can see a bright future coming. I feel like the people in leadership in Washington also feel like a change is needed. And if you're an American consumer and you're listening to this, like Clayton said, seek out those American producers, those small networks, and spend money with them, even if you have to save a little while to
Mhm.
buy their products versus a cheap knockoff alternative. Hey, let's help them out.
You guys don't need a new iPhone every year. You know what? $1,000 iPhone every year. You know what else costs $1,000 to last you about a year? Half a cow. Totally worth it. Worth every penny. Having a full freezer, man, there's nothing better than having a full freezer of meat that you know where it came from. That's just like
Yeah,
there.
it wasn't printed off a 3D printer.
It wasn't printed off a 3D printer. You don't have to. I don't have to worry about going to the grocery store for ground beef. I know I have it. I know I have enough to last me until I buy my next quarter or half a cow next year. Oh, I want steak for dinner. Yeah, I got that in the freezer and it's already paid for. I don't have to go out and buy it. I don't have to think about going to a restaurant and have someone cook for me. No, it's in my freezer. All I got to do is remember to thaw it, which I never do. Um, but like there's so much cool and man, and it's hard to say, I am very privileged to have worked in ag. I'm very privileged to not mind not spending money on other things to buy things like I don't mind self-sacrifice. I know it's not for everyone, but I truly believe you'll be more satisfied with the thing you spend your money on if you know where it came from and you know it was for a good reason. There is so much satisfaction in knowing the money you spent went to a good place. It is so great knowing that the money I've spent on like a cow or this clothing has gone to someone that I know, or at least I know the process was for the betterment of these people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you start buying in those small networks, you develop a relationship with the grower, and when you buy a product, maybe, like it's definitely benefiting him, and you can have that relationship where you don't feel like your money was spent in vain.
Hmm.
You bettered him and his family's life, or her and her family's life. So,
Yeah. Well, guys, that's all we got. Thanks for listening to us. See you on the next one.
like, share, and subscribe.